Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining me for another inner hour tonight. I appreciate it. And let's see here. There we go. So anyway, welcome. We're continuing our series here, which we'll be talking about in a moment. But as I like to do, I'm going to take a pause and light my little candle, which if you haven't had time yet, gives you a moment also to pause and kind of let go of your day or your week and just relax into being present with us the next hour. So there's my little candle. Alrighty. So as I said, what we're continuing this weekend and probably for one more class, maybe two, but for one more for sure, um, is our series on good and evil, which as a little intro, most of you have been to some of these or all of these, but just in case anybody's missed the whole series, it's a series on kind of how we understand good and evil. What is that? Particularly in this particular series, drawing a lot from the Bible, since that's for the majority of us, if we have a religious background, that's probably it. And whether or not we still believe those things or believe all of them is another story altogether. But the other thing I want to say in terms of the good and evil, just briefly, is as the good and evil idea is not limited to biblical stuff. It is in the Jewish Bible. It's also in the New Testament, but it's not just in Jewish Christian writings. That idea appears in multiple and ancient Hindu sources, Chinese sources, other Mideastern sources, Persian sources, later Islamic sources, and so on. So it's very prevalent. And though we don't talk so much about it here, maybe in this country or in this region of the country, the Nordic religions, the Scandinavian religions, the Odin and Thor and the Norse mythology, plus the Roman and Greek mythologies, pretty much anywhere you look, or at least that I've looked, uh, has the idea of either a good and bad God, kind of this dualistic God nature, because some Gnostics believed that. Later Zoroastrians believed that, but he did not teach that. Um, or these good and bad gods and goddesses that were kind of always at a struggle with mankind, caught in the middle, or as angels and demons, or sometimes they use different terminology, but basically it was a way of framing the fact that in our real life, in our everyday real life, we encounter whatever name we put on it, we encounter these wonderful, beautiful, good, inspiring, holy, sweet, healing, loving, all the good stuff. We encounter good, we encounter goodness, but we also encounter not just mistakes or missteps or errors. We certainly do those, but we encounter something far worse than that. We encounter something that's, or at least see and hear about it in our world. If God for, hopefully we don't experience it directly in our lives, but just flat out evil, something horrific and terrible that is being done intentionally to inflict terror or pain, particularly on the innocent. That goes way beyond making a bad choice or saying something in anger for a moment or those kinds of things that all of us are wont to do from time to time. So the nature of this kind of bigger good and bigger evil, what is that? How does that work? How does that impact us? And which I want to talk about that part of it more tonight. And then one more time, unless we get through this really quickly, one more time I want to talk about. So given all that we've discovered, talked about in this series, and obviously it could be a lifelong study and a lifelong class, but just given the various facets of this subject that we've addressed so far, um, in the next class, or perhaps next two, if we don't get finished, then So given all that, now, what are we supposed to do? What do we do with all that? And does anything we do actually make a difference or make an impact on the nature of all that? So, um, as before, you are welcome to, excuse me, turn on your cameras and or mics whenever you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. There's also, as you all know by now, the little hand icon in the, excuse me, in the lower part of the menu of the Zoom, if on most Zoom setups. And you can do a raise hand, which I will technically theoretically see on the right side of my panel. Sometimes I don't see it. So if you raise your hand for a while and I don't call on you, I'm not ignoring you. Just turn on your mic and put camera and say something because I've failed to notice it. But I try to pay attention to that. So you can get my attention either way at any point. You don't have to wait until I ask for comments, but I will be asking for comments shortly too. So you're welcome to speak anytime you feel inspired to do so. Okay, so one thing I do want to mention before I forget is an announcement, actually. And I think all of you have gotten this information because you're on our inner hour list, or you would not have gotten these links. But um, I'm this is the last inner hour that's going to be taking place on Friday evenings. Starting next week, Friday would be the 17th, but we're not doing one on the 17th. Starting next week, we're going to be moving inner hours to the same time, 7 to 8, but on Sunday evenings, not Friday. So starting next weekend, there'll be no Friday inner hour on the 17th of October, but there will be an inner hour on Sunday night, the 19th of October. Still the same time from 7 to 8 Eastern time. I'm hoping that you still have the interest and that it doesn't make a schedule conflict for you and that you can all still join us on Sundays. I really hope that's true. I sent out a notice about it. I won't go into all that except to say briefly, Ani and I've been doing this for 5 years now, and we're ready to have our Friday night Shabbat time back. So we're moving it to Sunday night. So we have our Friday evenings. And the other thing is that over the years, a number of people have expressed interest to me that they'd like to be part of the Friday night classes, but they can't. They either are playing musical gigs Friday night, or they work Friday night, or that's their social night, or their, whatever night, their Legion night, or their movie night, or whatever it might be. So I'm hopeful that most of you, if not all, can join us Sundays, and that maybe we can even add some people who couldn't be here on Friday nights. We'll see. But that all changes next week, whatever the outcome. So, all righty. So tonight, what I wanted to talk about with the good and evil, we mentioned last couple of weeks the idea of angels and demons. I'm just going to use those terms, though I acknowledge that in other cultures they may be talked about slightly differently, gods and goddesses, forces, whatever, natural elements, these different things. But I'm going to just categorize them for now, for simplicity, as angelic or demonic. And the demonic, basically, in the biblical narrative and related ones, Kabbalistic and mystical Christian and whatnot, um, those are seen as angelic as a type of creation that's different than human, and that the fall of angels or the rebellion of angels, which is told in many narratives, uh, resulted in these so-called fallen angels or rebellious angels who didn't want to cooperate with God's plan and wanted to do their own. And those fallen angels are what we refer to in biblical related material as demons or demonic forces. And again, if you don't like to think of them as entities or beings, um, though if you, God forbid, encounter some, well, God forbid the demonic part, hopefully you do encounter the angel part, uh, you will encounter them as beings or entities, more than likely. Uh, but they are definitely an energy type, a type of, so if you prefer to think of them as energies, however you do it. So angels and demons, though they are a different creation than we are, and they function differently than we do, because we're all part of one creation, there's an interplay. between human consciousness and angelic or demonic. And that interplay affects us. For the most part, for most people, it is an unconscious effect. They're not aware. I'll give you some examples in a moment, but they're not aware that there is any they're not aware there are such things as angels or demons. They're not aware that there's any impact on our consciousness from either of those forces. And many civilized, highly educated people like to think of themselves as too sophisticated to believe in this kind of nonsense that is all ancient superstition, trying to describe basic forces of nature. Wherever you stand on that, here we are. And so that influence, the angelic and demonic influence on our consciousness, is something that we can experience at a conscious level. And sometimes they're quite direct experiences, and mostly they're indirect. And for most people, they're at an unconscious level. That's been my experience overall among people who've talked to me about this sort of thing. So, to the unconscious part, um, you have somebody, I'm going to give you several examples. And then after I do these, I'll specifically ask for comments and questions in your ideas, but you are welcome to interrupt too. So, so in the unconscious aspect, as an example, you have somebody who is very depressed, very angry and bitter type person, not just momentarily, but that's their kind of their chronic psychological condition. And one of the ways they handle that is they do drugs and drink to excess. And they hang out in places like seedy bars or drug houses or place in an environment where those things are readily available and encouraged and where other people are doing them too. So they kind of fit in. So this person who has no awareness of angels or demons, but is psychologically troubled, and they start frequenting environments where where abuse occurs, whether it's chemical abuse, some other form of addictive abuse, behavioral abuse, verbal abuse, some kind of really negative things are happening in these environments they frequent. Those environments draw demonic energy. And I've never been personally, and this is just me, I've never been in one of those settings where I didn't notice the demonic presence, sometimes multiple ones. But let's just say it draws that kind of energy. So the person goes there not looking for demons, not trying to worship Satan, not any of that stuff, just a guy or a woman who's troubled, and this is their avenue of trying to escape or get rid of it, but in fact it makes it worse. They go to this place, and then because of their energy, this demonic thing of darkness, of despair, of anger, of blaming, all of that's already going on in the person's consciousness then draws this demonic influence, which feeds off of those energies, particularly the depression and fear. And it begins to influence that person. Have another drink. Well, I better stop and go home. Oh, no, no, have another one. You'll feel much better if you have another one. Almost like a person talking to him, like in the old cartoons with the angel and devil on opposite shoulders. No, have another one. Or, I don't know, that cocaine stuff, I guess it's supposed to make you feel really good, but I don't think I want to try it. Oh, here, try a line. And then the person does. And pretty soon, they're more and more addicted to this deviant behavior that's very destructive and often leads to or contains an element of violence toward themselves and or others. And then sometimes addiction to violence, addiction to creating fear, addiction to causing pain. And those things, the desire to cause fear, the delight in causing pain, the hoping to find a way to damage the innocent, that's the characteristic of evil. And people can so open themselves over time to that without even realizing it, that they become very, very colored by that influence and essentially become more demonic than human. And in some cases, um, I won't say it's 100% irreversible, but I'll say it's pretty close. They become, even though they are technically a human. Their consciousness has become demonic and not human anymore. Um, so those are things that happen on an unconscious level. A less dramatic unconscious level is, you're having an argument with somebody and you can think of something really painful to say to them that you know is going to be really painful, and you think of it, but your better self, so to speak, goes, "Oh, don't say that. Don't say that. Just hold your tongue. Don't say it. Even though you're mad, say something else, say something less, say something not so hurtful. Just be quiet." And then if you give into that, that's sort of the higher influence that you're yielding to. But if you give into, I know this is really going to cause them pain and I'm mad right now, so then you say it anyway. That may not be a direct demonic influence, but that is a demonic quality, wanting to cause pain. And the more we indulge ourselves in wanting to cause pain, we actually begin to open ourselves up at an unconscious level to this demonic kind of influence. And most of us, of course, don't go to any extremes with either the good or bad. We're kind of more in the middle, but it can happen. Now, of course, that can happen on the good side too. We'll get to that in a moment. But so an example of a conscious one is that you're making a choice to do something. You're making a career choice or a relationship choice or what you're going to say to someone or in a group setting choice. And you feel, well, I felt moved to. Well, lots of things move you. What moved you? Your ego, your anger, your revenge, a little demon talking in your ear, a little angel talking to you, the spirit of the divine in your heart. What really, I mean, lots of things move us. Which ones are we listening to? And so in those instances, we can open to literally angelic voices or angelic influence, and you can hear them as voices too, which are always encouraging us, if you will, to, or holding for us to choose the higher part, choose the higher part, choose the higher road. No, be true to yourself, the high self. No, be true to yourself, be true to your soul. No, this is not reflective of the image of God in you. No, that, that kind of thing. To really call us toward, lead us toward, inspire us toward, hold for us choosing that higher way. That's the angelic influence. And we can open to that too. And we can train ourselves to open to that so much that we can actually begin to have encounters with angels, dialogues with angels, actually see them like you would a vision or a person or an apparition, and witness them um, as a being, or hear them, or both. More often it's not. It's an invisible kind of energetic exchange, but it can take a visual and auditory form too. So there can be a conscious aspect to that, and there are people in the world that are trying very hard to make conscious connections with the divine, whether it's the angelic realm or just the living spirit of God itself. They're trying to have that kind of a life and to make connections with those. They're developing that conscious ability. Others, while it won't be any of you, probably not anybody you know either, but there are others in the world who are doing the opposite. They're trying very hard to make connections with the dark force, with the dark Lord, with the dark side of things, because they believe that's where they'll find their power and they can get revenge for a life that they're very upset with, and take control over it and get back at anybody they think contributed to how bad things are for them, including God, because ultimately it's all God's fault, they think. So there's that in the world. That's the kind of conscious part versus the unconscious part. And and take this one last step, and then I'll stop and see if anybody has anything you'd like to share or ask. The That plays out individually in the examples I've given, and I'm sure you can think of many, many, many more examples. But it also plays out in group consciousness. So, for example, if you see a bunch of people who are, let's say, and I don't care which political camp they're advocating or protesting against. You take a group of people who, if you met them one by one in their life, many of them would probably be like normal folks, kind of decent, okay people who happen to be passionate about this particular issue or that particular issue, or this party, that party, this person, that person. And and they decide they want to make a difference in the world. So they march or they join a protest, either for something, hoping to maybe enact legislation or get something changed, or against something, hoping to stop it or whatever. And when they join that, their intent is basically good. I want to make a difference in a way that I think will help the world or our culture or my city or whatever. But once they're in the group, and then emotions flare up, and there are counter protesters, or perhaps a police force that's trying to keep them peaceful and in line, or from damaging property, or whatever they may be there for. And as those tempers flare and the passions get higher, those otherwise normal people in this group consciousness turn into a mob consciousness, and a mob consciousness inevitably turns violent against the ones that they consider their opposition. It starts with verbal violence, and then it escalates very quickly to physical violence, sometimes deadly physical violence. And then some of those people you can't believe, or I mean, some of them you could definitely believe are the ones that do it. There are some, the agitators are trying to foment that, but everyday people caught up in what they think is a good cause can also get caught up in it because they're now part of this group consciousness. And the group consciousness, here's my point, is also affected by angelic influence. Keep this peaceful, help people see your point, help them, bring out the best in themselves so they make better choices and are willing to change for the better, versus that's right, kill these people, torture these people, make them pay, which is a demonic influence. Very easy for that, especially the demonic part in mob rule, to take over the consciousness of that group. And we see the results and are seeing it all over our world right now. And the results are horrible. Um, if everybody in that group had trained themselves to respond to the higher far more often than the lower, even when they gathered as a group, that would not happen. But most people do not train themselves that way. And they get caught up in the predominant prevailing passion of the moment. And often that leads to this demonic influence and very, very negative and destructive action. And then that being said about the groups, again, I'm not going to name any particular groups, but there are many groups in the world advocating for or against this or that, whether they're civil groups, civic groups, um, uh, political groups, religious groups, religious fanatics wanting this or that, um, on the right or left, political groups who are fanatics, right or left, um, whoever it is, that group consciousness, particularly when there's a zeal and fanaticism about it, is dangerous. The very last example of this example is um, in 1939, basically, and before that, 33, and leading up to 39, and then the Nazi regime in World War II. The Treaty of Versailles that ended World War One, Germany, the people of Germany, by and large, felt, and not without reason, felt very unfairly treated. They felt like their economy was hampered, their ability to defend themselves was hampered, their Teutonic and Aryan reputation was stained and belittled. And their honor was, they had a lot of negative reactions to the conditions they had to live under after that treaty. And their economy was terrible. Um, and so along comes the National Socialist Party saying, we're going to make everything better. We're going to make this division between high and low, between rich and poor, between the people in power and the people not in power. We're going to set that right. And we're for the little guy. We're for you people. We're the National Socialist Party, and we're going to take care of everybody. And we're the savior. we're going to restore, the country. We're going to restore our power. We're going to restore our pride and independence. Um, we're gonna make the economy great. We're going to get rid of all these people who are causing us problems. All those people who were causing them problems were the Jews and the communists. If there were no Jews and communists, we'd be great. Our country would be great. We'd be great. We'd be prosperous. Everybody'd look up to us. All we got to do is get rid of these people who are our problem, the Jews and the communists. And so they did. And it got more and more and more demonic to the point that the SS literally had secret castles where they worshiped Satan and did black magic rituals and had quests all over the world to try to discover what they believed were objects of mystical power that they could use in the dark side to totally dominate the world and everybody's life in the world from birth to death. Their training camps for children um, taught them hate, taught them violence, and literally structured their lives from birth to death, the whole thing. Um, and we came very close to the world being dominated by that, incredibly close. So that was an example of how something that starts out with, let's improve conditions for ourselves and let's get some respect and all that sort of thing. When you have these strong passions, can lead to this demonic influence. And then again, by the end, Hitler was not only insane, probably from syphilis, but other things as well, but was also literally demonic. And the SS was as well, most of them, probably all of them, um, doing very perverted things and really, really, really getting ecstatic about doing them.
David,
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to say one of the things that when you started this, it reminded me of was I've been, as a teacher, I've been in uh, school board meetings and had parents come in. I mean, you're talking about whole swaths of the world. I'm just even the idea of uh, a passionate cause,
Mhm.
even in a school board meeting, it can get to the point where if people are having the kinds of energy that you're talking about, and even though it might be, they really do want the best for the children and have a different idea about how to go about that. I mean, it doesn't even have to be as grandiose as whole nations. It
Oh,
can
true.
even be, and the one I'm thinking of was a very small rural school district. So it doesn't have to be huge. It can be small groups of people, depending on what they're giving themselves over to in the way of emotion
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I see that all the time. I mean, I've seen that all the time as well. And um, I've in a smaller scale, even smaller than your school scale, like when I have done funerals or weddings, believe it or not, for families, um, I've just seen some terrible things happen after funerals of, families and brothers and cousins stuff fighting and backstabbing and trying to get this and I want that and no, this was supposed to be mine, and just not these people that you normal would think would be reasonable people just go like nuts. So yeah, and it's a much, of course, that's a much smaller and temporary usually scale, but yeah, that's another really good example. Thank you. Anybody else comments on any of this so far, or ideas or questions you'd like to share with the group? Yeah, Nahum and Julie.
Yes, Uncle Stephen, it's me.
Hello.
Hello. So I have two things.
Great.
One, to give you and Auntie both a bit of a tiny finger pointing and a reminder that you are because you are both fellow bookworms, so thusly you should know better. Is I will remind you again of Rabbi David Cooper book Invoking Angels.
Yes, yes. We have that and we've gone through that actually. So
Oh
that's
boy.
yes, thank you. That's actually a good one for anybody else who's interested. Rabbi David Cooper has a book that's still available. I'm pretty sure Amazon has it. I know there are other places that do. And that's the title is Invoking Angels. And um, he does talk about angels and archangels in specific kind of roles that some of them have, but he works with it quite a bit as an energetic type work, and how you can do things to actually work with the angelic influence. It's a really, I find really useful book. So if you don't have it, it's a good one to check out.
There's
Thank-
also, there might be a companion CD with it as well.
There
I
is
don't.
actually, at least in my copy. I got mine a while ago, but yeah, there was a CD with it.
Mhm.
Nobody has CD players anymore. I don't know if they still package it that way, but I hope they do. Because
I think there is an audiobook or something like that, so you can
oh,
get a,
okay,
you
cool,
might be able to, I don't know.
cool.
I think you can, I know you can get a digital copy, but I don't know if it has the CD with it or not.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah. Thank you for that suggestion, Shirley. But you said two things, so I don't want to cut you off.
The other one is your usual poke, your idea for a song. Um, and this one you should know, Shlomo Carlebach's The Angel Song.
I don't know that one. I don't know.
That boy, you know better. You need to look it up.
You might know it.
You might know it. Adonai, Adonai, Elohe Israel, Mimini Michaya, Smoli Gabriel, Umilfonai Uriel, Umeachorai Raphael, Ve'al Roshi, Shechinatel. On my right, in the name of God, God of Israel. On my right is Michael, on my left, Gabriel. Uriel's in front of me, behind is Raphael, and o'er my head surrounding me, God's own holy love I fear.
Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you, Shirley. Actually don't know that. Although the melody sounds like something I heard Neshama humming
Uh-huh. Yeah,
time.
it's on YouTube. You can look it up.
Yeah, I will do that. Thank you. Thank you. All
Here's
right.
another one for you to put on
Yeah.
your list of songs you owe me.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. I have official permission from Neshama actually to record the Return Again song and some of those things. Yeah.
Nice.
I'll
I
look.
love that.
Yeah. I haven't talked to her in a long time, which reminds me I should check in with her
Well,
and
then ask her about that one too.
Rabbi. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have something you'd like to share? I want to say one other thing just because while I don't want to turn the discussion in this direction, I think it'd be kind of negligent not to say it on my part. Um, because of all the vitriolic hostilities we see in the world at large right now, including in our country and in our political system right now, um, there's something dangerous that I want to just point out, and it's dangerous in two senses. But the one sense is that I see, again, without pointing fingers, I see people um, literally demonizing other people, people in power that they don't like or groups that they don't like. This group is they're terrible. They're ruining democracy. They're demonic. They're fascist. They're whatever. Oh no, it's this group that's ruining democracy, and they're the fascists, and they're demonic. And no, it's those type of people that are demonic, and they're the ones. Demonizing people is how we end up with the Holocaust. When we make people not people, when they're things and they're less than human, then you end up being able to do things like the concentration camps and the death camps of Nazi Germany. And even when some people, obviously not the world at large, found out about them, it was like, well, they're just Jews. Or in certain periods of slavery, and I don't just mean America, but in certain periods of slavery in different countries, including ours, sadly, um, there were times and places where some slaves were treated as things, as literally as property. They were like considered animals. And so they were treated like animals. Now, to me, if I consider them animals, I'm going to treat them really well. So that doesn't really apply. But many people, when they think of them that way, think you can treat them however you want. So it's a dangerous psychological state, and to to try to convince people that a group of people or an individual person is is demonic and should be killed, that if they could just be killed and we could get rid of them, then the country would be way better and we'd all be way better. And um, super, super dangerous. We've been that route before. We don't need to go that route again. Now, that being said, the other side of that is in an, if we're aware of that and we're making an effort not to demonize our opponents, our enemies, that's a very good thing, to make an effort not to do that, not to put up with it, not to stay silent when somebody does that about our opponents, but to speak out against it. That's all good. But at the same time, if that convinces us intellectually that really there aren't any demonic forces that we're dealing with, and there aren't any demonic forces that need to be stopped, that's also dangerous. That's kind of what Neville and even Churchill initially, in the beginning with Adolf Hitler, just kept, well, he's really not a terrible, he's really an okay guy. He's just trying to help Germany. And we'll just, this, okay, just let him, it's not really good, but okay, it's all right. We'll just kind of go along with that. He said he won't do it again and he won't expand anymore. And well, okay, we're not gonna just let him do it. That was a disaster. And it's equally a disaster any time in history when actual demonic forces are beginning to take over various things and there's no resistance because we don't believe such things are even happening. That's also dangerous. So it's an interesting world we live in right now. But to say true things about people who are in opposition to us on various issues is just fine, even if those true things are unflattering. But to say things that try to get people riled up against them to the point of being willing to commit violence themselves, or at least condoning it. Oh, good, I'm glad they took that guy out. That's a horrific, oh, good, yay, yay, he's dead, whoever it is. Or maybe not even by violence, but just when certain people die, like in a particular position of power, and that person passes away, and the opponent's going, "Yay! Thank God he's dead or she's dead." That's really that's not human. That is not a human way to react. That when Moses freed people from being bitterly enslaved and horribly treated for over 400 years and escaped from Egypt and the Egyptian army that was pursuing them. And then a good portion of that army drowned in the Red Sea. And the Jews got safely to the other side. Well, they weren't Jews then, but when they got safely to the other side, they all started celebrating. And Moses said, "What are you doing? How can you be celebrating at the death of God's children? What is wrong with you?" So um, it's fine to stand up to that which needs to be stopped. But it's really important that we not encourage ourselves or one another to take delight in the pain or death of anybody. So, okay, so that's that part. Anyone else have a question or comment on that? And then, yeah, please, James, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine on my end anyway.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, this is the first time I've been on my iPhone. I'm in the middle of the wilds of Greenville, Michigan.
Oh, well, you're coming on mine. You're coming through strong. Your picture's
Okay,
slightly jumpy, but your voice is real good.
okay, yeah, it's because I'm holding my phone. So, okay, I think something that and like I actually have direct experience that Annie did as well at a
Yeah.
school board meeting about textbook adoption. Basically someone saying, well, if you can't have anything nice to say about apartheid, don't put it in the book, which was interesting. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah, and you see a lot of that now, I think, in media. But the real point I was going to make is it kind of ties into what you've been talking about. You know, why do but the banality of evil, as I did discuss it, just everyday evil acts like happened in the Holocaust, and
Yeah.
then happened in Mao Zedong's Great Society or whatever he called it. A lot of things are based on when I was in my sociology minor at IU. I took a sociology of religion course, and the professor made a big deal about plausibility structures and feasibility structures.
Yeah.
And so we create these structures that not only make our beliefs plausible, but make them feasible. So you can have some pretty whacked out views, but they sound pretty feasible, at least in a lot of people's heads.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the issues that we have, you get one person by themselves and just say, "Hey, I really don't want to hurt this guy."
Right.
I mean, God, he's got a family. He looks different from me, but he's just like me.
Right.
But you get 100 people together,
That's right.
and it's like, oh, suddenly these acts, which could and normally do include acts of severe violence,
Mhm.
because remember in Indiana we had lynchings in the 20th century,
Oh, yeah.
went all the way up there. I remember seeing a picture at IU on something that happened in Muncie,
Yep.
and when you get everyone together, all it takes is one person a little bit more charismatic than the others to say, hey, let's do it, this is okay to do it, God is telling you to do it, or
Mhm.
somebody's telling you to do it. And it's easy for these things it's a lot easier for the common mind to be infiltrated with contrary thoughts than it is for an individual.
Oh, yeah.
But once that individual gets picked up in that swell,
Mhm.
it's really hard to go after it, go against it.
Mhm. Very true. Very true, James. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I have stories, personal stories about that too. But yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point. And I think your point was even more clear than what I said about once you get caught up in this sort of collective or common mind, it's much more easily influenced than individual people are often. So that's
Yes.
a good point.
Yeah. Well, there was a great scene in a book. The guy who wrote Ender's Game,
Hmm.
he wrote multiple books after that,
Hmm.
and I think the third book in the series had us actually discussed it. He actually carried out one of these little mob things where people start off with the right idea, and then suddenly it becomes we're torching a forest.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'd forgotten about that series. Thank you for that one too. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was the second. I think it was the second or third movie, or book, but I think it was the third book.
Okay. No, really good points. Thank you for adding all that, James. Anybody else? All right. So, I'm going to present a little thing here briefly that will lead us into the next thing. There's two parts I'd like to finish up before we stop this series. I'm going to introduce one here in just a moment. We won't get too far into it, but uh, and that is so the idea of whether you call it salvation, which is a Christian term primarily, because the Jewish idea of salvation is quite different than the Christian theology of salvation, or whether you call it redemption, or whether you call it restoration, or whether you call it teshuva, the return back to a right orientation with God and life again. Um, but this kind of coming from the state of brokenness back into wholeness, however we describe that process also is described with often different modalities of how to achieve it. But that process of return or healing or coming back into wholeness or returning to God or the various different um, metaphors we use for describing the process, that process itself of how do we come back from all of this brokenness and duality and conflict between good and evil, not only around us but within us. How do we transcend that and come back into some state of peace again? Uh, that's discussed in all the major religions that I've studied, and in many of the kind of quirky little ones off to the side too, because it's an important theme, as opposed to just hopelessly being caught up in that drama endlessly until you die, or if you reincarnate forever, then endlessly caught up in it, literally, because you just keep reincarnating into that same kind of environment. How do you do that? And so, just as a quick groundwork for starting next time, um, the biblical narrative is uh, slightly different than certain other traditions. Not a lot, but slightly different. There's similarities to the Sumerian tradition, which is earlier, similarities to it to Hindu tradition, some similarities to it to the Nordic traditions, particularly with like the idea of Valhalla, where the noble, brave ones and all that go to this kind of delightful abode. Um, so some variances, but basically the Bible story itself, one way to look at it is a story that starts out with a creation story. Here's this something we can't understand or name, whether we call it God or life or being or whatever we call it. At some point, there's a creation that takes place. This creation occurs, and it has multiple facets and multiple dimensionalities to it. And we are part of that process and part of that creation. And once that happens, then there's now this place called Earth, and on it there are life forms. There's animal life forms, bird life forms, aquatic life forms, human life forms, and so on. And those life forms are all at peace with each other. In the early chapters of Genesis, nothing eats each other, nothing commits violence on each other, and everything gets along. They even communicate with one another, and they communicate with God, the Spirit of God that created all of it. There's a connectedness to all of it and a peace amongst all of it. Very shortly on, that all falls apart. And in Genesis 3, just the third chapter, and it all falls apart. That's the part called the fall of man, where our consciousness changes and we start perceiving not this interconnected oneness and not peace among all creation, but conflict and strife and a dynamic struggle between all forms of creation, a lack of understanding and communication between all forms of creation, and between the creation and the spirit of the creator itself. And and that's called the fall of man. And we, from that point on, are lost in this world of duality and conflict and confusion and struggle through the rest of the whole Bible almost. And then the part that's left out of the biblical story, unless you have like an Ethiopian Bible or an ancient copy of the Book of Enoch, is something that preceded the fall of man, which I mentioned briefly before, which was the fall of the angels, which is in Jewish Christian literature primarily contained in the Book of Enoch, which we now have copies of, and you can find online as well, and primarily in the Book of Jubilees, which is not part of the Protestant Bible. There's some other places, and some of the Qumran Essene writings talk about it too. Anyway, so there's this fall of the angelic, certain parts of the angelic realm that created this demonic adversarial energy called Satan, or the adversary. And then as you go through the Bible, then you have these powerful figures come forward. You have this figure of Abraham come forward, whose primary message is to have faith in the oneness, to have faith in this interconnected oneness of life and the goodness of this creator, this living spirit, whatever we're going to call it, and changing his whole life because of that, and then creating future generations and giving birth to what became both the Hebrew nations and the Arabic nations through Ishmael and Isaac, uh, and how those began to develop. And again, those two almost always from their inception in the biblical story have been in conflict also, another dynamic duality. Uh, and then you go on to this great liberator, Moses. And Moses, which means to draw out. The idea usually being said because he was drawn out of the river when he was a baby in a basket, but in my opinion, more likely because he helps us to draw out that indwelling spirit into active expression. And he liberates those people from centuries and centuries of slavery into freedom. And then with that freedom sets up a brand new culture and a brand new religion, which becomes Judaism, and a brand new set of teachings, which becomes the Torah, which becomes the foundation of the Jewish Bible, and then the foundation of the entire Jewish Christian tradition, because everything that came out of that started there. And then you have these various prophets who come. And because what happens is this kind of roller coaster ride of humanity of, oh, getting in touch with God, refocusing on God, being kind to each other, improving society, setting up civil structures and civilization, cooperating with each other, and then falling back into violence and the demonic influence again, and being at war, and my power and your power and all those struggles, and then coming back up again. And every time it's in one of those lows where everything's falling apart, a prophet's sent and goes, no, 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 you need to turn back around. You need to turn around, come back to God again, come back to peace, come back to that interconnectedness, start caring for each other. And then that prophet inspires a certain segment of society, sometimes lots of people, and things start getting better. And you go on the uphill part of the roller coaster. And then before long, another prophet has to come along with essentially the same message, slightly tailored to a different time, but essentially the same message. And that goes on through a series of them until Moses himself dies and the Hebrew Bible comes to an end. And then you have the apocryphal phase, which is the period between the end of the official Jewish Bible, where no more was going to be added to it, and between the beginning of what became the New Testament that the Christians add. There's a period of lots of other writings that didn't make it into the Hebrew Bible or into the Christian New Testament, but there's lots of them. And there's this apocryphal period of intertestamental writings that talk about the struggles of mankind and the hopes of a Messiah who will usher us into a new age, into a messianic age where all of mankind, all nations will worship the one faith, the one interconnectedness and Father. 1 second, guys, and I'll be right with you. And ladies, actually. And then eventually that leads into Yeshua and his restoration and renewal of trying to get back the spirit of Judaism and that interconnectedness with that oneness again, and ways to do that, which then later by Paul and others were transformed into a completely different religion with completely different theology and values called, well, not values, but theology and beliefs than Judaism ever had. And you have Christianity. But ultimately, the goal of all of that was, how do we come back to restore this pristine state again of experiencing in our consciousness that interconnected oneness, and actually letting the spirit of love guide not only our own choices, but our cultures and societies. So stopping there, Nahama or Shuli?
Mommy this time. It's me
Okay,
this.
great. Hi.
Um,
Hey, you look
hi.
wonderful. How are you? Feeling
Okay.
better?
Yeah. Little
Good,
by little.
good, good, good.
Um, what I'm struck with as you've been talking about this whole thing, and I go, yeah, that's ego. Yeah, that's a much more expanded, coming from a much more expanded place. And I'm looking at that ongoing struggle in every person I've ever met
Mhm,
between what the ego wants,
mhm.
and which tends to not be very mature, for want of a better word. It seems to just want more and more and more and more. Where when one takes a deep breath and lets go of that wanting and just relaxes into seeing the wonder and the beauty of the world around us
Yeah.
and a much more expanded self, we stop grabbing for things and we start bringing better parts of ourselves to the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a really key thing. And uh, I heard somebody a long time ago. It stuck with me, and I think I think it's good in that it's a memorable kind of a phrase. I think it's a little overly simplistic, but the phrase was that the soul in us is the child of God, and the ego in us is the child of the devil. And I thought there's some truth in that because the ego is what almost always gets me in trouble and gets me, disconnected and at odds and struggling. And when I can listen to that higher part, it usually works out way better. But
And
and
what
and if you do look at the history of our world in terms of whether it's spiritual and or political or state leadership of some kind that has created really disastrous results, um, all of them have been a very powerful ego-centered, ego-driven leadership, you know.
Mhm.
So
if I look back over the history of our world, when I see people acting from the ego, we end up like we are today. And
yeah,
when I see people acting from a much broader perspective, you see peace growing and kindness and caring for one another and that sort of thing.
yeah, yeah. Um, again, the during because you and I grew up in the civil rights era, where they
Mhm.
did prior to the Civil Rights Act and through that whole thing. And there were a number of groups and individuals who had quite a lot of social prominence and influence. They were working ostensibly toward civil rights for people of color. And some of them were working toward it very violently. And some were working to set up black supremacy over white supremacy. And some were like Martin Luther King, who were trying to say, come on, people, we need to all be in this together. And was trying to lead a peaceful transition, whereas not all of the players were trying to lead peaceful transitions. Or Gandhi in India. Other people had tried the Indian independence thing too, with a lot of violence, and Gandhi's trying to inspire people to make change through peaceful means was was really revolutionary for the time and definitely for that country. So
Right.
we do have a few opposite examples of people really not leading from their ego too, but they're far fewer, I think, than the other ones.
And something that comes, it's from the movie Gandhi, the one that had Ben Kingsley in it, I think, where there was that big scene where they're all sitting and having a peaceful protest, and the British come out and they're hitting them and clubbing them and doing all of this, and you watch just the filmmaker did a wonderful job of capturing the
Hmm.
uh, almost the shame that just grew more and more,
Hmm.
and with the soldiers
Yeah, yeah,
when they were fighting people that weren't fighting back,
yes, absolutely.
and
Uh,
what it can do to us,
mhm,
how it can tear us apart
mhm.
to meet that kind of peaceful
Yes.
peaceful I guess resistance
Hmm. Hmm.
or with
Absolutely.
violence.
Absolutely. I don't
When we
remember I don't remember if this scene was in the movie or not. I don't remember, but might have been. But one of the top BBC reporters at the time, who was very famous in the United Kingdom, recovered that story. And his news break that he flashed back to England was, today Britain has lost any moral supremacy it ever had in this struggle.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, he was just horrified, you know.
yeah.
And that
it
really affected a lot of people. And as more people saw that, they went, "Oh my God, we don't want to be part of this. We don't want to be doing this," you know.
right,
Yeah.
right. So we have at each step, we have a chance to make
Yes,
a choice.
yes, exactly, exactly.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. So we're at that time already again. So I'm going to draw us to a close here in a moment, but thank you all for participating, even those of you who are silently participating. So
And
next,
you are at Unity.
sorry.
Unity.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, for those of you local, I'm going to be the guest speaker at Unity this Sunday. So, and interestingly enough, talking about forgiveness and atonement. So, anyway, you're welcome to join us at Unity at 10:30 if you're free to do that locally here. Um, Again, reminder, next weekend, no Friday night in our hour, it switches to Sunday night next weekend. We're going to finish, hopefully finish up on what this kind of return and restoration process might look like and what we can do ourselves and the dilemmas surrounding us right now in our current world. And if we have more discussion and we need to go an extra meeting after that, we will. But we're going to do at least one more on this topic next time. So thank you so much. And again, you're invited to email me. I enjoy reading your comments and ideas and insights, so you're always welcome to do that about this program or any of the other things that we do also. So let's just take a very brief moment, if you would join me, and ask for that spirit of peace to really come present in our own hearts, a spirit of peace and forgiveness. And that spirit begins to grow throughout our culture and our country and our world. That as a people, we begin to value peace and forgiveness more than we do power and profit. And I just pray that this week will be a week of peace for each of us, and that we can and will be willing to extend that peace and invite others into that peace with us. Because it really does, in my heart of hearts, I think that's really how it all starts, is me accepting that spirit of peace in my own heart and then encouraging it in yours and recognizing it in yours. So thank you all for being with us on this journey, and we really love you and we appreciate your support. Have a good night and a good week. Bye for now.